We're holding Sif Dalid in the middle of Sif Dalid, which we began last week. So let's just recap briefly what we already learned, and before we continue. Sif Dalid, hopefully you can see it on the screen. Asr lashik as chaver afilu kol shehu. It is forbidden to withhold even the slightest amount of money that belongs to another person. Shenamar leisashik as riyacha, like the pasuk says. That's unlike typical stealing, which is taking something away from another person against their will. Oishek means when money comes into your possession with the owner's consent. Like if you owe somebody money for a loan or for a rental or for another reason that was initially a legitimate transaction, but then refusing to pay, or pushing them off and saying, come back another day, with the intention to never pay back, as we discussed at length in the previous shir, that is an issur deraisa of loisashik. This lav only applies to another yid, but not to a guy. Against a guy, there is no prohibition of loisashik. Continues the Alter Rebbe, this exception that loisashik does not apply to a guy is only provided that there is no chilul Hashem. But if there is a chilul Hashem, it's forbidden under any circumstances, even to a guy. What's an example of a situation where there would be no chilul Hashem? For example, if somebody borrowed money from a guy, and then the guy died. So one is allowed to deny the loan to the guy's son who comes to collect the money, and he says he doesn't know for sure. He says, I think you borrowed money from my father, maybe you paid back, maybe you didn't, so you're allowed to deny it. Tell us it never happened, or I already paid back. Because this is not Gazela, this is Oishek, and the money originally came to you in a permitted way, and simply denying it passively is called hafka salva. It's not gzeila, it's hafka salva. It's defaulting on a loan, withholding payment on a loan, and that's permitted when it comes to a guy. But if the guy knows that he's lying, it's forbidden to deny anything to the guy because it is a chilul Hashem. So continues the Alter Rebbe. Even in a situation where the guy doesn't know, so there's no chilul Hashem. It's only permitted to, the way they translate it here is renounce a loan, I see, to default on a loan, to withhold payment on a loan, or another chayv, or another obligation. But when the object that the guy gave you is intact, it exists, it's not a loan, which is an abstract obligation. I owe you money, but it's not you can't point to any specific pile of cash and say I owe this. It's not be'en. But when so that's permitted. But when something is be'en, let's explain what's going on here. The Gemara says in Bava Kama Daf Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis that it's permitted to steal from a guy, as we discussed that in Sif Aleph already, is forbidden. But hafkas halva to withhold payment on a loan, that's mutter. Comes the Alter Rebbe along over here and says hafkas halva is mutter, but hafkas pikadin is aser. What's the difference between hafkas halva and hafkas pikadin? Look, the Alter Rebbe explains here. Hafkas halva means I owe him money. Money is an abstract concept. But hafkas pikadin, to withhold, to not return something in a tangible object that the guy gave to you, to not give it back, that is stealing. That's regular gzeila. So a guy lends you his car, and he comes back and he says, "Can I have my car back?" You can't say, "Oh, I don't know, never happened, I don't remember," because that's not hafkas halva. Hafkas halva means I owe you money. Hafkas pikadin means he gave you an object, and now he wants to give it back. So to not give it back is simply gzeila. Um, it's important to know that there are Paiskim who are makel on this, namely the Taz in Yeridei and Simon Kuf Chaf, which we'll discuss a little bit more later, is makel. And he says even if it's a pikadon, even if it's be'en, it's permitted because it's the same thing as hafkas halva. So if you can employ some kind of tricks or tactics in order to keep it for yourself and never return it, it's permitted. So it's important to point out that the Alter Rebbe over here is clearly not passing like that. Is Machmir, says it's forbidden, and there are other poskim who passing this way as well. V'loy oid continues, Ela afilu kana chayfetz minachri. Even if you buy something from a guy, asr la teise becheshben b'nesinas mois bi'ada chayfetz. It's forbidden to deceive him, to deceive the guy, to trick him when you're making the cheshbon, when you're paying for the object that you purchased. Like the pasuk says, you should make a reckoning with his purchaser. What's the pasuk in Parshas Behar? I think it's talking about a Jew who had to sell himself as an eved, as an indentured servant to a guy because of his tremendous debts and his inability to pay them. So there's a mitzvah to redeem a fellow yid from his indentured servitude to a guy. Nevertheless, you're not you have to pay the guy a fair price. If the yid sold himself to a guy for a period of 6 years for $1,000 a year, and you come to redeem him after a year, after 2 years, you have to pay the guy however much is left. If it's 4 years left, it's $4,000. If it's 3 years, 5 years. That's what the Gemara says in Bava Kama. But what are we emphasizing over here? We just said hafkas halva is permitted. So you might think that if we make an arrangement, a transaction with a guy, I agree with the guy that a guy is going to sell me phone for $300. The guy hands me the phone. I make a kinyan on it. Hagba, Mashicha, whichever kinyan is appropriate and effective according to halacha. So now I made a kinyan on it. It belongs to me. Now there remains a technicality that I have to pay for it. So one might think that that's a loan. It's a halva. So to not pay it is afkas halva, and that's permitted. So if I can somehow trick the guy into not paying at all, or into paying less than what we agreed on, that should be permitted. Says the Alter Rebbe over here, that's not the case. This is not considered hafkas halva. To actively trick a guy in a sale, like in the case we just described, is not considered hafkas halva, and he explains why. The guy only agreed to sell you the object for a certain amount of money. And if you trick him with the cheshbon of the money and you don't give him the amount of money that you agreed on, you're stealing it from him. If a guy agreed to sell me a phone for $300 and I don't pay him $300, then he never agreed to sell it to me under these terms. So when I take it, I'm taking it without the guy's consent. That's called stealing. This is not called hafkas halva or hafkas chayv. Even gnevas das means to trick someone in a way that doesn't necessarily involve a financial loss. That is forbidden, even for a guy. It's also to be gain of das. A guy commission is bar Hilchos Gezeilah, as is explained in Hilchos Gezeilah. So let's unpack a little bit what we just said. The Gemara says in the same sugya that we mentioned earlier, about Kama Daf Kofit Gimel. Gemara says that's the sugya of Gazalaku. The Gemara says a few things over there. Gzeilah is aser. To steal from a guy is aser. Hafkas halva asay is mutter. Then the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel ta'usay mutaris. A guy's mistake is permitted. And the Gemara brings a few stories over there of different Amirayim, Ravina, Rav Kahana, Shmuel himself, who had different stories where they had transactions with a guy, and the guy made a mistake, and they were able to capitalize on that mistake and save a little bit of money or get a little bit of a better deal than they would have been able to otherwise. So the Gemara says simply ta'usei muteres. The Rishonim have a machlekes. Machlekes Rishonim. What does it mean ta'usei? Does it mean you're allowed to actively deceive a guy and cause him to make a mistake, or does it mean if the guy makes a mistake on his own, then you're allowed to capitalize on that mistake? So the opinion of Rashi and the Torah and some other Rishonim is that you're actually allowed to trick the guy. You're allowed to go out of. You're allowed to employ some kind of any kind of deceptive tactics that will cause the guy to make a mistake, provided again that there is no chil Hashem, that the guy can't find out about it, can't catch on. But if it's a way that the guy is not gonna catch on, and there is no possibility of chil Hashem, then it's permitted to actually deceive the guy somehow. However, the opinion of the Rambam and other Rishonim is that it's forbidden. It's forbidden to actively deceive a guy. It's what the Gemara says to Usim Mitaris means if the guy makes a mistake by himself, the guy makes his own mistake, then you didn't cause it to make a mistake. You made a mistake, so you made a mistake. You don't have to correct it. The Rama in Shulchan Aruch in Cheshen Mishpat Simon and Chesif Beis brings both of these opinions, and he says as follows: Taus akum, a guy's mistake, kagoin lahatoisi b'cheshbon. Like, for example, what does taus akum mean? Lahatoisi b'cheshbon, to deceive him, to actively deceive the guy. Or hafkas halva, which we mentioned earlier, mutter. That's permitted. As long as the guy is not going to find out about it, because otherwise it would be a chil Hashem. V'yasha imrim, says the Rama, there's another opinion, the aser lataise, that it's forbidden to actively deceive the guy. But if the guy made a mistake by himself, then it's permitted to take advantage of that mistake. So, general, Kollel when a Pesach brings two opinions, one stam and one yashemrim, stam v'yashemrim halacha kastam. So it's mashma that the Rama is paskening like the first opinion, like Rashi and the Torah, that say it's permitted to actively deceive a guy, and not only to capitalize on a mistake that the guy made on his own. However, the Shach over there in Sivkat and Gimel brings down the Marshal and Yam Shel Shleiman Bava Kama, and the Marshal paskens like the second opinion, who says that it's usher to actively deceive a guy. It's mashma somewhat that the Shach also paskens this way. He brings the Marshal, doesn't comment, doesn't disagree, and the Alter Rebbe over here clearly only brings a second opinion, doesn't even mention that there's another opinion in Rishonim that is Mekel, and also in another place in Cheshen Mishpat, in Hilchos Gezeilah, the Alter Rebbe also only brings this opinion. So goes without saying that for us, Chabad Chassidim, that we follow the Alter Rebbe's shitta in every situation, bein lahakol, bein lahachmer. So this is how we pass on halacha l'maisa, that it's only permitted to take advantage of a guy's mistake that a guy made on his own, but to actively deceive a guy is usher. But in any case, the truth is that the rule is that we're dealing with a shayla of leisigzel. By the rest, you have to follow the opinions that are machmir. The Marshal over there takes it a step further, and he says even a Rashi. What's Rashi's svara? What's Rashi's shita? Why does Rashi say that it's permitted to actively deceive a guy? We mentioned Rashi's svara earlier, that when a guy and I agree on a transaction, and then the transaction already happened, I already made a kinyan on whatever the guy is selling to me. So the rest of the money, the payment that I owe to him, that's a halva. Of course, halva is mutter. So Rashi says it's mutter. The Marshal says this is the machlekes. Rashi says that's considered hafkas halva. The Rambam says it's not considered hafkas halva. Whether he gives a few explanations, says maybe the guy is trying to test you. He gives other explanations why we're not why we don't consider this hafkas halva. But he says even Rashi is only mekel in such a case. He only says that it's permitted to trick a guy in such a situation where it comes out that it's a hafkas halva. But I'm going to read the lashon of the Marshal. Shaloi kederech, if it's not in such a situation, kagoin she'ata kayin mimenu kelim or dvarim acherim v'ata mateu shemoisif lecha b'minyan. If you buy something from a guy, kelim or something else, and you trick him to give you more than what you agreed on, Or the opposite, you sell something to a guy and you trick him into giving you more money than what you agreed on. Az Rashi nami to have a gezel. Rashi also agrees that that's called gezel. That's gazela. To trick a guy in a situation where it's not hafkas halva, where you're tricking a guy into paying you more money than what he really owes you, or into giving you something that he didn't really agree to give you, everyone agrees that that's usr. And the Shach also brings this down. So that's the opinion of the Marshal and the Shach. As mentioned, in any case, the Alter Rebbe is machmer, like the Rambam. So to apply this to a contemporary example, to claim something from insurance, for example, that never happened, is completely fraudulent or exaggerated. So that's called tricking a guy to take money from them. That's actively tricking a guy. So it goes without saying that according to the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe and the Shach, Marshal, sorry, who passing like the Rambam, that this is usr, this is gezel. But according to the Marshal says, even Rashi, everyone agrees that this is Gezeilah. Now there are Achronim who argue with the Marshal and who say that that Rashi and those who are makel even to actively trick a guy in any case. Okay, for us there's no nafkamina because the Alter Rebbe is machmer in any case. Another thing that the Alter Rebbe mentioned over here is that gnevas das she'ein ba chisarin mais, gnevas das, that even if it doesn't come at a financial loss, is forbidden. Commission is bar b'hilchos. As explained in Hilchos Gezeilah. So let's just I want to read the lashon of the Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Gezeilah because it's going to help us understand something that's relevant to our halachos over here. The Alter Rebbe says in Hilchos Gezeilah, halacha yudbeis, afilu lignev daita bedavar shelo yagia lehafsid la'anachri, even to steal a guy's das, meaning to trick a guy in a manner that's not going to cause the guy to lose any money. Aser midivrei sefer. Kagain limker le b'sar nevela b'chaskas shchuta. For example, to sell a guy treif meat that's nevela, b'chaskas shchuta. What does it make a difference to the guy? You tell the guy he wants shechted meat, tell him it's shechted. It's shechted. Happens to be that when you were shechting it, something went wrong. A lot of things that can go wrong with shechting, and that could cause it al pi halacha to be unavela. But what does it make a difference to the guy? So he wants a shchuta. You sell him a shchuta. Tell him it's a shchuta. It's aser. It's gnevas das. If it's an avela, you have to tell him it's an avela. The salach in Cheshen Mishpat. It's also, by the way, the Rama brings it in Yeridei and some Kufit Zayin. Va'af lignev das habrias b'dvarim. To be gainev das anyone habrias, not necessarily a yid, any human being. Afilu b'mila achas shel sfas chalakis gnevas das, even with one word, sfas chalakis, smooth talk, or gnevas das b'maisa shemar sheisha b'shvilan ve'ina oisa aser. That's aser. So, in other words, this is what the Alter Rebbe is mentioning over here. Gnevas das she'ein ba chesar mois. Gnevas das that causes chesar in mois. That's called tricking a guy to steal from him. That the Alter Rebbe says is aser. But even gnevas das she'ein ba chesar in mois, even gnevas das that doesn't cause him to lose any money is aser because of gnevas das. So alachas kama if it causes him to lose money. So again, to apply it to a contemporary example, applying for a loan, for a mortgage, let's say for a bank, and the bank wants to see documents that you make a certain amount of money, that you have a certain amount of assets, in order to qualify from the loan. So is it permitted to falsify documents that to demonstrate that you make money or that you have something that you really don't? So let's break it down. What halachic categorization does this fall under? It's tricking a guy to take money away from him. So tricking a guy to take money away from him is usr, but it's geniva al das l'shalim. You're not stealing the money to keep it. It's a loan, so you're planning to pay it back. So we learned, we mentioned last week that the Alter Rebbe paskins in the end of, not last week and last year, and at the end of this sif, And in other places in Shulchan Aruch that stealing from a guy al das l'shalim is permitted. So here you can argue that it's ganav al das l'shalim. Yeah, I'm stealing from a guy, but I'm intending to pay it back. Ganav al das l'shalim from a guy is mutter. By Yid, you're not allowed to. By a Jewish bank, it's for sure. It's ganav al das l'shalim, it's aser. But by a Goyish bank, maybe it's ganav al das l'shalim. What's the catch? It's at the very least gnevas das. It's gnevas das sheyash b'chisarin mois. But even a gnevas das she'en b'chisarin mois, that's aser. According to the Alter Rebbe and many other poskim. Okay, so now comes the exception, and we're can breathe a sigh of relief. Mikol mokim. If the guy makes a mistake on his own, mutter, then it's permitted to take advantage of the mistake. If the guy made a mistake on his own and you didn't cause him to make a mistake, if it won't cause a chil Hashem because he'll never know. It is ideally, it's proper for the Yid to tell him, I'm relying on your cheshbon. I'm relying on you. You made the cheshbon. If you made a mistake, you made a mistake. This Reish al Cheshbain Chani Seimech comes from the Gemara. Like we mentioned earlier, the Gemara brings 3 stories over there of Shmuel, of Ravina, and Rav Kahana. In all 3 stories, there was a situation where they took advantage of a guy's mistake. And in all those 3 stories, you only find that Rav Kahana told the guy, Chazida Allah kasamichna, I'm relying on you. So the Rambam, so in Shulchan Aruch, the Rama, the Mechaber, they don't bring this down. You have to say Reish al Cheshbain Chani Seimech. However, the Rambam in Hilchos Gezeilah Perkid Aleph, I believe, yeah, Gezeilah Vaveda Perkid Aleph Halacha Hey writes Tzarich Sheyemer Lo Yisrael Reish al Cheshbain Chani Seimech. The Yid has to tell him. Yid must. You're obligated to say Al Cheshbain Chani Seimech. I'm relying on your cheshbon. However, the Maggid Mishnah over there already points out that the fact that Shmuel didn't do it and Ravina didn't do it, the fact that Rav Kahana did it must be that Rav Kahana did it only as Amidas Chassidus, and it's not required Meikar Adin. And you look at the Alter Rebbe and you see the Alter Rebbe doesn't write like the Rambam. Tzarich Sheyemer Lei, he writes Nachin Sheyemer Lei. So it's mashma that the Alter Rebbe is going with the Maggid Mishnah over here that it's Nachin, it's the right thing to do, it's the Amidas Chassidus, but it's not necessarily required. But to speak about the main Gufishal davar, what does it mean that a guy made a mistake? If you sell something to a guy and the guy by mistake pays you more than what you agreed on, so as long as there's no chil Hashem, you don't have to return it to him. Or the other way around, you bought something from a guy and the guy gave you more than what you bargained for, than what you asked for. It happens with Amazon deliveries. Amazon could happen, sends you something that you didn't. You bought one thing, Amazon will send you 2. Walmart deliveries happens very often. You make an order from Walmart, and they throw in a couple extra things that you never asked for. So as long as there is no possibility of chil Hashem, you're not obligated to return the extra items to the guy, or a guy in a Geisha store, they give you extra change. It's not an obligation. We spoke in the first year, the Be'er Gaila, who says that he never saw anybody get rich off of a guy's mistake, and there is an Indian to return it as to make a Kiddush Hashem, but Me'ikar Adin, this is the halacha. Tau Sakum is mutter. In the Sefer Piskei HaMishpat, which came out recently, a couple of years ago, by Simcha Yena Klein, I think is his name. He's a Dayan in London. As far as I know, he's still around. So he writes a few interesting examples of taking advantage of a guy's mistake. He says a country where a government gives a certain child allowance, a certain amount of money for every child that you have. So if you don't live in that country and you have a baby in that country, so the government will give you an allowance, and it's not a guy's mistake. That's the law. The law is if you were born in that country, you're entitled to that money. But he says, moreover, if you leave the country and the government continues sending you the money, that's a mistake that a guy made. It's a mistake that a guy made, and you're not obligated to return to them unless when you filled out the form to apply, you agreed that if you leave the country, you're going to report it to the government, and you knew already then that you're planning on leaving, and you're not. So that's called tricking a guy. That's not allowed. But if it's the government makes a mistake on their own, that is it would be permitted to keep that. And the same for any other type of mistake that the government makes. If the law is that you have to return it, then bepashtas you would have to return it because of Dina de Malchusa, as we'll discuss Dina de Malchusa more at length when we get there later in this simon. He gives another example over there. To book a flight on skip lag, which, just to explain briefly what that means. Let's say you want to fly from New York to Los Angeles, but tickets from New York to Los Angeles are very expensive. So you can book a ticket from New York to San Francisco with a stopover in Los Angeles. That's a cheaper flight. Let's say, I don't know if it is, but let's say it is. So you book that ticket and you get off at the stopover and you don't continue on the last leg of the journey. So airlines don't like when you do this, obviously, but it's they can't stop you both from a practical perspective and from a legal perspective. There's nothing illegal about it. So let's think about al pi halacha. So l'chayra, it seems like gnevas das, but what he says over there is it's not really gnevas das, because you're not telling the airline, I want to fly to San Francisco. You're telling them, I want a ticket to San Francisco, and you do. They don't own you. You don't. You bought a ticket. You have the right to ticket. You have the right to get off wherever you want. So that would be permitted. Another example is if, let's say, we'll use the example of an airline, but it could be any company, has a glitch in the website. The glitch in the website that, this is the example he gives, that you can add luggage to your reservation. And let's say you have a round trip ticket, you only add luggage one way, but the computer, the system is not able to differentiate, so it gives you a free bag on your way back. So he says that's Tawasaka. That's a mistake that a guy made. You're allowed to do that even l'chatchila. He says that it's not you're not tricking them. You're not tricking them because there's a glitch in the system and they're able to fix it. They don't fix it because it's not worth it for them. But he concludes that it's possible that they don't know bichlal about the glitch. He wants to argue that the fact that they give you the possibility to book a flight on their online on the system, that's as if they agree milachatchila that if there's a glitch, they're accepting that upon themselves. He ends up with the tzarichin. Obviously, with all the shilas that we mentioned over here, this is not halacha l'maisa. You should always consult l'maisa with your local Orthodox rabbi, but these are in general some of the halacha l'maisa shilas that come out of these halachas. And in the final paragraph of the sif says as follows: "Mishkin nachri chayfetz liYisrael." If a guy gave an object to a yid as a collateral, in other words, a guy owes money to a yid, and he gives him a mashkin. Yesh matirin lishtamish bei, af al pisha b'Yisrael kayetze beheri zagatlan. There are those who are matter to use the mashkin of the guy, even though to use a mashkin of a yid is gzeila, you're not allowed to do it. Because it's called shlichus yad b'pikadon. Shlichus yad b'pikadon is a form of gzeila, and it's aser. But by a guy, shlichus yad b'pikadon is mutter. We're going to explain why in a second. But just to focus on this yesh matirin, this comes up actually in two other places in Shulchan Aruch, once in Eir Chaim and once in Yeridei. In Eir Chaim and Hilchos Pesach, that the place can bring down that by Pesach, but the Seder, you should have put out all the fancy kalim and gold and silver that you have in your house. You should put it on the table. So the place can speak about if you have nice kalim that are in your possession as a mashkin from a guy, are you allowed to use them for this purpose? And the Alter Rebbe over there in Hilchos Pesach and Siman Tov Ayin Beis paskins b'pshitas that it's mutter, like the shita of the Chak Yaakov. over there. So even though over here he says yesh matirin, over there he says yesh matirin sounds a little bit more ambivalent there. Yesh matirin, even though he doesn't, but he doesn't say not, and over there he says b'pshitas that it's okay. And also again it comes up in Yerden Hilchos Gezeilah and Siman Kuf Chaf, and that's this yesh matirin over here that the Alter was referring to, is the shach and the taz over there, that we know Tfilas Kelim, if a yid purchases kelim from a guy, so once they transfer ownership from the guy to the yid, they have to be tabled in a mikveh before they're used. Shaila, that's already it's already in Gemara and in Shulchan Aruch, that if a yid has a mashkin from a guy, does it have to be tabled before it's used? And Allah is it table it without a bracha, but the place over there, the Shach and Taz speak about, wait a minute, they have to be tabled. That means you're assuming that you're allowed to use it. So, and they say, yeah, you're allowed to use it. The Taz over there, we mentioned earlier, the Taz says you're allowed to use it because you're allowed to even keep it and never give it back because it's Hafkas Halva. We already learned that the Alter Rebbe doesn't pass in this way. The Alter Rebbe doesn't agree. That's not called Hafkas Halva. It's called Hafkas Pikadon. But to use it with the intention to give it back is permitted. And he's going to explain why here. Even though by yid this would be forbidden, this would be shlichus yad. By a guy, it's not an issue of shlichus yad. Shenemer im leishalach yad b'mlechas re'ehu. The pasuk says the isser of shlichus yad says re'ehu. We already know that when it says re'ehu, it means another yid. Re'ehu v'leishal nachri. Shlichus yad ein a gzeila legamri. Shlichus yad is not real gzeila. Allah shemishtamish b'pikadon l'seir chatzmi. Shlichus yad means that you're using a pikadon which belongs to someone else. You're using it for yourself. You're not stealing it. You're going to give it back to him. It might break. It might get ruined. If it gets ruined, if something happens to it, you're going to pay it back. So stealing something with the intention that if it's going to get ruined, you're going to pay it back is called ugeineivah al das l'shalim. By a yid, that's forbidden. But by a guy, the Torah only forbids stealing, totally stealing without the intention to pay back, but stealing with the intention to pay back is ugeineivah al das l'shalim, and that is permitted when it comes to a guy. So that concludes Sif Dalet, and unless there are any questions, we'll stop here for today and continue next week with Sif Hey.